Fear is the thing that holds most people back from taking action. And the scary thing is that this is where most dreams die. The moment someone doesn't find a way to navigate this feeling. And that's why it's so important to cultivate a sense of fearlessness. And being fearless doesn't mean the absence of fear. Because as a human being, you will experience fear your whole life. But being fearless means that you are bigger than the fear. It means that fear is no longer influencing what you do and what you don't do, because you get to choose. And you can cultivate this sense of fearlessness in many different ways. And one way is to realize that you're not that important. It's not about you. The world doesn't revolve around you, and you don't want to make every single thing so personal. Because this is what your ego is doing. Your ego makes every single action as important. It takes it way too serious. It creates your actions as life or death. Because your ego is trying to protect you, especially trying to protect your identity. And whenever you want to pursue a dream, even when you're just thinking about pursuing a dream, that's immediately a threat to your identity. Because what your ego is doing, it creates you as the center of attention. And the more self-absorbed you are, the more afraid you are to take action. Because every single action that you take will say something about you. Every single mistake, every single failure will say something about you. But this is not true. And that's why you want to connect to the truth of you're not that important, because that removes the I out of the equation. Just imagine what it's like that it doesn't matter what action you take. It doesn't matter how many failures you make, how many mistakes you make. It doesn't change anything about you. It doesn't say anything about you. If you can really connect to this truth, then you're free. Then you're free to do whatever you want. And then you're not taking everything so serious. And we can also call this, you cultivate this sense of fearlessness. Because you know whatever you do, it doesn't change anything about you as a person. Another way to cultivate this sense of fearlessness is by creating fear as fuel. And the interesting thing about the mind is that it immediately jumps to conclusions. Whenever you feel something or experience something, it creates a conclusion. Just like when you're tired, your mind thinks we shouldn't be going to the gym. When you feel fear, you shouldn't be taking action. When you feel fear, there's something wrong with you and you need to fix yourself. Maybe you've experienced this when you're texting a girl that you're dating and she's not immediately responding. And your mind immediately jumps to a conclusion as in, she must be with another guy. And we want to slow this process down because we want to challenge these conclusions. How do we know this is even true? So let's take the action one. When you experience fear, you shouldn't be taking action. But why not? How did we get to that conclusion that when you experience fear, you shouldn't be taking action? How do you know this is even true? And what if the opposite is true? What if when you experience fear is an indicator that the man that you're meant to be is waiting on the other side? The man that has unleashed his potential. What if when you experience fear, your dream is waiting on the other side? It's waiting for you to move through this fear. What if through this fear, you will experience depths within you that you can't even comprehend right now? Let's imagine these conclusions. You will experience something completely different. And the beautiful thing is that you get to rewrite your story. You can recreate your relationship with the experience of fear. Because this is just an automatic response that you're conditioned to do. As in, the feeling of fear is present, so I don't take action. But you get to choose. You get to rewrite your experience of fear. Because if you connect to one of the conclusions that I just mentioned, and you, of course, can create your own, you will get excited when you experience fear. You want to move towards it as fast as possible. It will create, of course, this nervousness experience as well, but at the same time, this excitement and curiosity, because you want to know what's on the other side. The other way to cultivate this sense of fearlessness is realizing that the fear in your mind is worse than the actual experience. Because you start to overthink this feeling of fear. You start to think about all the worst case scenarios. And what your mind is trying to do, again, it's trying to protect you. It wants to prevent this experience from happening. So it's overthinking this fear, thinking it gets this sense of control over the situation by thinking about it more. But what is actually happening is that you start to experience all the worst case scenarios that you're overthinking about. So you're actually experiencing the thing that you're trying to avoid. And you're not just experiencing this in one moment, you experience this for days, weeks, months, and for some people even years. And if we take the actual experience of failure itself and fear, so let's say you're afraid of failure, the moment of failure is usually one moment of pain, a few seconds, a few minutes. And maybe if we want to go to extremes, maybe it's bothering you for a day. That's it. But the fear in your mind creates suffering for weeks. And your mind is telling you that motion is the thing that you must be afraid of. That taking action is the thing that you must be afraid of. Because that's where the pain is. But if you realize that the actual pain and suffering happens when you're passive, when you're not taking action, that's when the real deep suffering is happening. And in motion, it's only oftentimes a few minutes of pain that you experience. This is when you want to get emotion as fast as possible. Because this is the thing we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid pain. So if we're being passive, we experience more pain than being in motion. And of course, it still takes courage to take action. But fear is a necessary part of courage. There is no courage in the absence of fear. So realizing that being passive creates more suffering gets you in motion faster as well. And another thing that you can focus on to cultivate this sense of fearlessness is shifting your focus. Because you will experience in life what you focus on. So when you focus on this fear, the fear becomes your reality and you start to experience fear. And it seems that this is the only option. But there are so many things that your mind just can't process. Your mind is limited in its capability to process all the information that's out there. So it just focuses on the most important thing that's in front of it. And in this case, it thinks the fear is the most important thing. So this becomes your reality. But you can shift your focus to something else intentionally. You can choose to shift your focus. And it sounds very simple, that what you focus on becomes your reality. And all it takes is to shift your focus. But it actually is that simple. Because let's say you want to post some content online and you feel fear around this. You start imagining that if you post a piece of content or even post content consistently, that the students in your class or the people at your work will see this. They will start laughing at you. They will make fun of you. And to make matters even worse, they start bullying you for weeks and months straight. It even gets so bad that you have to quit your job. You have to move cities. You have to move to a different country because you're so embarrassed about all the things that happened. This is one scenario that you can be focusing on. So this becomes your reality. This is what the action itself means. But what if the opposite is true? What if you would focus on that if you start posting content, YouTube videos on Instagram consistently, and certain videos go viral, you inspire the people around you for the courageous action that you're willing to take. You start even making money from the content that you're making. You are able to go full-time with your own business, with the thing that you're passionate about. You're able to quit your job. You are an inspiration for the people around you. You are able to travel the world because you showed courage in that moment. This is also what could happen in that moment where you showed courage, in that moment where you faced your fear and took action. Two different realities, different experiences. And the thing is that you get to choose. Oftentimes, all it takes is one simple question and you can shift your whole focus. And you can ask yourself, what if, and you go to the worst case scenarios, but you can also say, but what if the opposite happens? What would that feel like? What if you see a beautiful girl walking down the street and you think about all the worst case scenarios about the way she can reject you and you experience this suffering in your body? But what if she gets so excited when you approach her and when you give a compliment? What if she is the woman you will spend the rest of your life with? Just imagine about that possibility. Don't you want to find out? And that creates this excitement and curiosity. So shift your focus and you will create a different experience, which also cultivates this sense of fearlessness. And the last thing that I want to share with you as well is, if you want to be fearless, it's also important to zoom out. Because the thing is, when you are absorbed by your fear, you're so zoomed in onto one action and what this action means looking at your whole life. Because again, what your ego is doing, it creates this action as so significant. It's life or death. Your life depends on this small action. But does it really? Let's say you take that action and you fail. Let's say you take that action and you make a mistake. And you feel embarrassed. How bad is it really? Does it affect you an hour from now, a day from now, a week from now, a month, a year, 5 years? How significant is this action really? Because 99% of the actions don't affect you for that long. And in our minds, we create it as if it does. But you really want to take a step back and zoom out and see that the actions are actually very insignificant. And there are different ways in which you can zoom out, because the one that I just mentioned is looking at your timeline. Look at your whole timeline, your past and the future, and you can look at this action that you want to be taking. And look at all the years that are ahead of you. How important is that action? Looking at your whole life, how will it affect you? And especially, let's think about the worst case scenario. Let's say you fail. Let's say you make a video that completely sucks. How will it affect you, your whole life? It probably wouldn't. People don't care about it. You wouldn't even care about it. You will forget about it and move on with the next video, if we're talking about creating content. So if you zoom out and look at your whole timeline, you can see the insignificance of the action. And you start taking things less serious. And another thing, the way that I also zoom out is, I zoom out looking at myself. So even when I'm recording this video right now, I zoom out and see myself in this chair. I see myself, I see the house that I'm in. I see the city that I'm in, the country, the earth. I look at all the people that are walking around this earth, and I see how they're all stuck in their own fear and in their own reality. How important is that action really? The more you zoom out, the more you see how insignificant all the things are that you are worried about and that you are doubting and that you are fearful of. And that's the place that you want to get to, because you want to make the fear smaller. And this is also how you become more courageous in life. Because this is a question that I often ask myself, as in, what would it feel like if I would take this less serious? If I would take life less serious? If I would take this action that I'm taking less serious? Because, for example, even this morning, I experienced fear because I was going out in nature with my camera, with my tripod, to shoot some photos and some videos. And I was afraid of what people would think of me. And if people would walk by, walking their dog, and they see me with the camera, making photos and making videos, what would they think of me? But if I zoom out and look at that moment, how significant is it really? Looking at my whole timeline, and I could connect to the insignificance, and I could also connect to, I'm not that important. It's not all about me. When people are walking their dog, they're not worried about me. And maybe they make a comment. So what? They forget about me 10, 20 minutes from that moment. And this is how you can cultivate a sense of fearlessness. And all of these points that I just mentioned, they make the fear smaller. You want to, because your mind is such a powerful tool, but you don't want to use your mind to your disadvantage. You want to use it to your advantage. And that's why it's crucial to master your mindset. And it takes skill, it takes practice. You want to reconnect to these points over and over and over again. A lot of these points that I just mentioned, I learned them 10 years ago maybe. But I have to remember them over and over and over again and develop competency over time. So it's consistently building the skill of cultivating this fearless mindset. So I hope one of these points were helpful to you. And I'm also, because there are so many different ways in which you can cultivate this sense of fearlessness. So if you have a different way in how you approach this and how you approach these fears, I would love to hear from you in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.